What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we're going to be looking at the deck that won the Atlanta Vault Tour. Yay! Now, I say won the Atlanta Vault Tour. I did upload the final game yesterday, so I'll link that in the description. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Lots of fun. But remember, when you have adaptive finals, it's a bit weird. So Cav won. And he actually won the final. He won one game with his deck and one game with his opponent's deck. But remember, it is the deck brought to the final by the winner that is credited with the 8 power levels and the victory, whereas the deck brought by the loser of the final is credited with 7 power levels. I know that's not always strictly fair, but I'm going to allow it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to allow it. And what we see here is a fairly straightforward Dis Logo Shadows deck. Now, I say straightforward in no negative fashion whatsoever. But it is a Shadows deck that steals quite a lot of amber. A Dis deck, or suite, that is incredibly disruptive. And a Logos deck which draws a bunch of cards and gives you huge advantages. It's not like the video I showed you on the Origins winner recently, where it was just crazy in terms of the board wiping options that it has. But it's got all 3 of the houses, very good houses in Call of the Archons, and they all do what they are supposed to do. So if we start off with Logos, we see here exactly what we want to see. There is a library access. Library access lets you draw a card every time you play a card. It is the most ridiculous draw card we've got, and it's actually now been errated so that when you play it, you purge it because it was literally too good and was kind of ruining the game. That's right. So good, it had to be errated. We see a copy of Phase Shift that lets you play a card from a different house, and we see Wild Wormhole that gives you an amber bonus and lets you play the top card of your deck, which could be bad. You know, if you hit something like a Tendrils of Pain, more on that in a minute, we could end up just clearing our own side of the board in a very bad way. But it can also give you a huge advantage. And there are a few other ways we're drawing cards here. Doc Bookton, there's 2 of these. Every time you reap, you draw a card. That's quite nice. Works nicely. And then we've just got some other nice cards. So we've got a copy of Interdimensional Graft, which, if your opponent forges a key on their next turn, they've got to give you their remaining amber. That can be fun. We've got Twin Bolt Emission, which is really nice for doing 2 damage to 2 creatures. Just clears boards. Against stuff like Ember Imp, for instance, more on that in a minute, it's really quite good. We see Brain Eater here. You get to draw a card after a creature is destroyed fighting it. Told you there were more cards that let you draw. We've got Dr. Escatera. When you play it, you gain 1 amber for each forge key your opponent has. I'm going to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of this. In the late game, it can get you a couple of amber, but it's one of those cards, it's only really good when your opponent's forged 2 keys, which you don't really want them to do. There is a Ganymede Archivist. When you reap, you get to archive a card. Save it for later. A Titan Mechanic that reduces the cost of keys when it's on a flank, but remember that is for yours and your opponent. So in the final we saw Cav playing it when it was a good idea, and then throwing it at a White Exilix Dominator to destroy it when he did not want it on the field anymore. And then 1 copy of Replicator. When you reap, you get to copy the reap effect of any other creature, which could be great. If we have a look into this, there's just lots of disruption here. Chief among it, Ember Imp. Ember Imp was the real pivotal card in the first game of the final when his opponent played Library Access, using a Pemph Seed to reuse Library Access, and then realised that Ember Imp only lets you play 2 cards. So even though he would then draw 2 cards every time he played a card, he couldn't play any more cards. He hadn't taken out the Ember Imp. It was a mistake. It happens. We all do it. We've all been there. And if you haven't been there, you've not played enough competitive card games. You will be there. But that's the kind of thing that Ember Imp does. We see a succubus here. Lets your opponent draw to one fewer card at the end of their turn. That's kind of fun. And one card that came up huge in the final was Tendrils of Pain. Deal 1 damage to a creature, but 4 if your opponent forged a key on their previous turn. Well, that can just absolutely wreck the board, and it did. A lot of the time, this will be a board wipe card. But remember, if you don't want to hit it with Wild Wormhole, then be sensible. Because if it's in your deck and your opponent just forged a key, don't play Wild Wormhole. There we go. There's a copy of Fear in here. Return an enemy creature to your opponent's hand. That can be good for getting rid of a creature you don't want, though don't use it on something like a Dust Pixie. That would be bad. There's 2 copies of Poltergeist that lets you use an artifact controlled by any player as if it were yours and then destroy it. Really good if your opponent's got artifacts you want rid of. Red Hot Armor. Each creature with armor loses all armor until the end of the turn and is dealt 1 damage for each point of armor it lost this way. Really good against Sanctum creatures and anything else that has armor, really. Very situational, as rare cards tend to be. Free Fates destroys the 3 most powerful creatures. And at this point, you should be looking at it and going, wait a second. This does everything you need. You've got cards like Poltergeist for artifact hate. And you've got cards like Tendrils of Pain, Free Fates, Fear to get rid of creatures you don't want on the field. And then, of course, we can look at Charette, which captures 2 amber when it comes into play. And we've even got stuff like Toxin, that when you reap, you get to discard a random card from your opponent's hand. That's really good. We've also got Pit Demon that's got an action that steals an amber. Nice to have some stealing outside of shadows. And then, of course, we got Dominator Bauble. Just lets you use a friendly creature. It means that you get 1 non-disc creature to use every disc turn. So we've got Hand Disruption, House Cheating, Board Wiping, Amber Stealing, Amber Capturing. We've got almost everything in the disc suite in this deck. And then we can look at Shadows, and Shadows does what Shadows does, to be honest with you. It's stealing. So Ghostly Hand gives you 2 amber, but if your opponent's got exactly 1, you steal it. Too Much to Protect steals all but 6 of your opponent's amber. We've got Magda the Rat, that when it comes into play, it steals 2 amber. That when it leaves, your opponent steals 2, so do be careful. And then we've got Noddy the Thief, that's got an action that steals an amber. And we've got Dusk Runner, an upgrade that means that when that creature reaps, it steals an amber. Quite a bit of stealing. Oh, and Finishing Blow. Destroy a damaged creature if you do steal an amber. Not always going to work, but sometimes it will. And it will be great. And look, maybe you don't want to steal amber. Maybe you want to stop your opponent forging a key. Well, Miasma's here as well. Makes your opponent skip their forging a key step. Frankly, ladies and gentlemen, this is wonderful. Because you want Shadows to stop your opponent forging, and that's what Shadows does. It's like I said at the beginning of the video. You've got Dis, which is incredibly disruptive. Logos, which lets you draw cards and do extra stuff like that. And Shadows that steals amber. And there's nothing about this deck that really jumps out like that. There's no 4 copies of Control the Weak. There's no library access and a Nepenthe Seed combination, though there was in the other finalist deck. What we have here is 3 good houses doing exactly what they're supposed to do. We also have a safe place here. Basically, you get to move amber over and stash it. Simple as that, to be honest, ladies and gentlemen. It's quite nice. Special Delivery, that's got an Omni ability. You can use it regardless of who your active house is. And you deal 3 damage to a flank creature. If it destroys it, purge it. And we've got Speed Sigil. Now, Speed Sigil can be a double-edged sword here. The first creature played each turn enters play ready, but it's the first creature, not the first friendly creature, which means your opponent gets to use this as well, so you've got to be very, very careful. We've got Carlo Phantom. Every time you play an artifact, steal an amber. Probably should have mentioned that in the stealing bit. You're not overflowing with artifacts here, but hey-ho. To be fair, there are 3 in shadows here that we've mentioned. We've got Safe Space, Special Delivery, and Speed Sigil. Outside of that, the only one we've got is Dominator Bauble. So to be fair, I think 4 is average. It's not too bad. And then we've got Silvertooth. Silvertooth comes into play ready, but it's a 2-power creature with no elusive, etc. So the rule with Silvertooth is you bring it into play, maybe you sacrifice it to take out something like an Ember Imp, but most of the time, you're just playing it, reaping with it, and crossing your fingers that maybe you get to reap with it again in the future. This is a good deck. Like I've said, there's nothing in this deck list that really jumps out as, oh my goodness, that's amazing. How did he pull a deck with that? We saw that the Captain of Barracks launch, the very first deck that ever won a Vault Tour, had double Time Traveler. That sticks out when you look at the deck list. But that does not mean this is not a phenomenal deck, because it is. Just remember, ladies and gentlemen, with an adaptive final, it can be difficult to say exactly what the winning deck was, because really the decks went 1-1 in Atlanta. But as far as I'm concerned, just focus on the deck that's got the 8 power levels. So there we go. I like this deck, ladies and gentlemen, but I'd like to know what you think about it. So please do let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk about games like Keyforge and a whole bunch of others. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.